When you're done drawing your contours for your surrealism drawing, you're going to be ready to start shading. You're going to need to include 4 of the classic shading texture techniques and at least 2 invented textures. So it'll be handy for you to keep your worksheet with your classic texture shading techniques and the invented texture shading techniques that you planned in front of you. First, to start shading, choose an object that you know which shading texture technique you're going to use. I'm going to use dot stippling to shade in the face. You want to make sure that the edges of the objects look like edges and not like they're heavily outlined. So you can start by creating a clean edge by using that texture technique right along the edge. As you can see here, I didn't outline the edge of the face, I used dots to create the edge. However, when I'm shading in the nose, I want that nose, the edge of the nose, to be very clean. So I can start with an outline, but I'm going to make sure that I add dots or the dot stippling technique to touch that outline so that the outline blends with the texture technique. It should not look like you have an outline with the shading texture technique on the inside of that line. That line should blend with the rest of the picture. Only outline the object if you want to have a very sharp, clean edge. Otherwise, you should just use the texture technique. Next, I'm going to shade in the lips. I want to make sure that my lips stand out from the face. So I'm going to do 2 different things on the lips. First of all, I'm going to use a different shading technique to shade in the lips. I'm going to use contour line. And secondly, I'm going to shade in those lips very dark so that I have contrast from the lighter values of the skin. That way, the lips will look separate from the skin and stand out. So as you can notice here, I did start with a solid outline on the lips because I want to make sure that I have a very sharp, clean edge. I'm going to use contour lines, so I'm outlining the general line direction for how I'm going to shade in the lips, and then I'm going to try and shade those in using a very dark value. As a general rule, you want to try and have objects that are light next to objects that are dark. That way you're creating contrast so that those objects stand out from each other. Another tip that you can do if you have objects that are similar in value that are next to each other is to leave a small white space between the 2 objects. As you can see here, I'm going to fill in one of my invented textures in the background. But I see that the invented texture is a similar value to the shading that I used in the face. So when I draw my invented texture, I'm going to leave just a small space between the face and where the invented texture starts, a little white area, to make sure that I have that separation. Otherwise, sometimes your objects can become camouflaged and you don't have that contrast or separation between the objects from each other or from the background.